A wealthy businessman experiences a severe car crash and is rescued by a recycling worker, but her actions transform his life. Before we dive into the story, let us know in the comments which city you're tuning in from. Enjoy the tale. The rain was relentless that evening, flooding the city streets. Emma was pushing her recycling cart, rushing to get home before the storm intensified. Her young son Max was waiting for her, tired and hungry, in their modest apartment on the outskirts of town. As she turned a corner, Emma heard the screech of tires and a loud crash. Her heart pounded as she sprinted toward the noise. At the intersection, a high-end car was smashed against a pole. The engine was still running, but there was no movement inside. Without hesitation, Emma left her cart and ran to the car. The driver's window was cracked, and a man was unconscious behind the wheel. The smell of leaking fuel heightened Emma's fear. She tried to open the door, but it was stuck. Using all her strength, she managed to pry it open. "Sir, can you hear me?" she shouted, her voice shaky as she tried to rouse him. The man, Daniel, briefly opened his eyes. His vision was blurry, but he saw Emma's face lit by the flickering streetlight. Before he could speak, he passed out again. Emma freed him from the seatbelt and, with great effort, pulled him out of the car. She had just moved him a few feet away when a small explosion rocked the vehicle. Terrified but relieved, she watched as the lights of ambulances and police cars approached. Paramedics arrived quickly and placed Daniel on a stretcher. Emma left before the police could question her. She was soaked, exhausted, and her hands trembled, but she didn't want to be late getting home. When she entered her small apartment, she found Max asleep on the couch, clutching his stuffed bear. Emma sighed, changed her clothes, and knelt beside her son, gently stroking his hair. "Everything will get better, Max, I promise." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Daniel was rushed to the emergency room. As the medical team worked to stabilize him, a faint thought crossed his mind before he lost consciousness completely. He needed to find the woman who had saved his life. Morning light filtered through the hospital windows as Daniel slowly woke up. His eyes struggled to adjust to the fluorescent light in the room. A throbbing pain in his head reminded him of the accident. He tried to sit up but felt the weight of his condition and decided to stay still. A few minutes later, the door opened. It was Ethan, his loyal assistant. Always efficient, Ethan looked relieved to see his boss awake. "Mr. Daniel, thank goodness, how are you feeling?" he asked, approaching the bed. Daniel gestured weakly, indicating he was well enough to speak. His voice was hoarse and faint. "I'm alive, and that's something," he replied with a weak smile. "What exactly happened?" Ethan explained the accident and how Daniel was found by a woman who pulled him out of the car before it exploded. "She saved my life." "Who is she?" Daniel asked urgently. Ethan shook his head. "Unfortunately, no one got detailed information. She left before the police could talk to her. Reports indicate she was a young woman, likely humble, with a recycling cart she left behind." Daniel frowned, a mix of gratitude and curiosity filling his thoughts. He closed his eyes, trying to recall the face he saw that night. It was a vague image, but something in her eyes seemed etched in his memory. "Ethan, I need to find her. I want to thank her personally. Use whatever resources are necessary." Ethan hesitated for a moment. "Of course, sir, but do you think she wants to be found?" "That doesn't matter," Daniel replied with determination. "She saved my life. It's not a debt I can ignore." As Daniel rested, Ethan put the company's contacts and resources to work. It took only a few days for him to learn the basics about Emma, a hardworking woman, a single mother, supporting her son Max by collecting recyclable materials. The information moved Ethan, but when he reported the details to Daniel, he saw the real impact it had on his boss. "She has a son," Daniel murmured thoughtfully. "Ethan, hire her. It doesn't matter in what position or what it takes. I want to help her without her knowing it's because of me." Ethan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What if she says no? Someone like her might get suspicious of something so sudden. Daniel smiled, a mix of cunning and sincerity on his face. "You're creative. Find a way to make the offer irresistible. But make sure she doesn't know I'm behind it." Across town, Emma was starting her day with the same goal as always, making sure Max had food on the table. Dressed in simple, comfortable clothes, she organized the recyclables she had collected the day before. Despite the challenges, her determination never wavered. As she dropped Max off at the small community daycare, Emma barely had time to process the unexpected approach of a well-dressed man who introduced himself as an employee of a major company. "Emma Johnson?" he asked with a formal smile. "My name is Ryan, and I work in human resources. We're expanding our team and noticed your profile through one of our community training programs. We'd like to invite you for an interview." Emma frowned, confused. "Training? I think you must be mistaken. I've never been part of anything like that." Ryan kept smiling, hiding his unease. "It must be an old record, but regardless, the position is yours if you're interested. It involves simple administrative tasks, no prior experience required. We provide training along with benefits like health insurance and child care support." Emma's eyes widened. It seemed too good to be true. Even so, she hesitated, unsure about stepping so far out of her comfort zone. "I don't know. I've never worked in an office before," she admitted. Sensing her doubt, Ryan gently pressed on. "Think about your son's future, Ms. Johnson. This could be an opportunity to change." Those words struck a chord. Emma looked at Max, playing with other children in the daycare playground, and felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe it was time to take a chance. "All right, I'll accept," she finally replied. "But only because it seems like something that could help my son." Ryan nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. You'll start next Monday. All the details and instructions will be sent to your address." Emma returned home, feeling a mix of anxiety and relief. As she thought about the new opportunity, she had no idea that her new job was directly connected to the man she had saved that rainy night. At the hospital, Daniel listened with interest as Ethan gave updates. Learning that Emma had accepted the offer brought a rare smile to his face. He wondered how her life would unfold from now on and silently vowed to repay her for what she had done for him. Ethan, meanwhile, couldn't notice the change in his boss. Daniel's gratitude seemed to have deepened into something more profound. Still, he remained professional. "And now, sir, what's the next step?" Daniel looked out the window, the city's skyline reflecting his determination. "Let things progress naturally. She deserves a chance to grow without feeling like she's being watched. But I want regular updates on how she's doing. And, of course, keep everything confidential." As the sun set, a new journey began for both Emma and Daniel. Two lives that had crossed paths by chance were now destined to intertwine even more. On a sunny Monday morning, Emma adjusted the simple dress she had chosen for her first day of work. Her heart raced as she looked at her reflection in the small, worn mirror. She wasn't used to formal clothes or the environment she was about to step into, but something inside her insisted on believing that this could be the start of a new chapter for her and Max. After dropping her son off at daycare, Emma headed to the company's address, holding a small bag with her documents and a notebook for notes. When she arrived in front of the towering corporate building, she froze for a moment. The gleaming glass, the majestic height of the structure, and the well-dressed people going in and out made her feel out of place. "You can do this, Emma," she murmured to herself before stepping inside. Walking through the revolving doors, she was greeted by a luxurious and bustling environment. The marble floor gleamed under the shoes of executives, and the receptionists looked impeccable in their suits. Nervously, she approached the front desk. "Good morning. My name is Emma Johnson. I have a scheduled meeting." The receptionist smiled, typing quickly on the computer. Yes, Miss Johnson. Mr. Ryan is expecting you on the 5th floor. You can use the elevator to your right." Emma thanked him and stepped into the elevator, watching the numbers rise on the illuminated panel. Each floor seemed to bring her closer to something unknown and intimidating. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, Ryan was already waiting for her. "Miss Johnson, welcome to our team," he greeted her enthusiastically. Ryan led Emma down a corridor to a training room. There, she was introduced to other new employees and given basic instructions about her role. At first, it seemed simple: organizing documents, scanning files, and providing administrative support to a small department. Despite her lack of experience, Emma listened attentively to the explanations and asked questions whenever necessary, determined to do her best. "Let's play a game with those who only read the comments. Type cupcake in the comments. Only those who get this far will understand. Now let's continue with the story. While Emma was learning the first steps of her new routine, Daniel was watching everything from a distance without her knowing. Ethan kept him updated on her progress, sharing subtle details that made him smile. It looks like she's doing well. There's no doubt she's dedicated, Ethan said as he handed over the reports. Daniel read the notes with interest. Knowing that Emma was finding her place there filled him with satisfaction, but also brought a strange unease. He wanted to see her in person, to observe how she was adapting, but he knew it was too risky at that moment. Let her continue at this pace. I don't want to interfere, Daniel replied, though his mind was divided. In the following days, Emma began to feel more comfortable in her new position. The work was repetitive, but she did it with dedication. More than that, the salary was enough to ensure that Max had better food and new clothes. For the first time in years, Emma didn't have to worry about counting every penny before going to the market. One afternoon, while reviewing a stack of documents, Emma was approached by a coworker, Maria, who sat down next to her. "Hi, Emma, right? I'm new here," she said with a friendly smile. Emma returned the smile. "Yes, I just started, still trying to get used to everything." "Oh, don't worry. Most of us started out the same way. With time, it all gets easier. And if you need help, feel free to ask me," offered Maria, genuinely kind. The interaction made Emma feel more at ease. She started to make small friendships at work, which made the days less lonely and helped her feel part of something bigger. However, she still had no idea that the company's owner was closely following her journey. Daniel, meanwhile, was about to leave the hospital after weeks of recovery. Accompanied by Ethan, he walked through the corridors with a cane for support. Although his improvement was evident, he still bore the scars of the accident. "Finally free from here," Daniel said, taking a deep breath as he walked out the hospital's main door. "Now it's time to get back to work." Ethan nodded but couldn't help noticing Daniel's distant look. He knew his boss was eager to see Emma again, even if he wouldn't admit it. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Ethan asked as he helped him into the car. Daniel just smiled. "There's a lot of work to be done, and something tells me it's the right time." At the office, Emma continued to focus on her tasks, unaware that Daniel's return was about to change the course of things. After weeks of silence, the elevator in the main building opened, and Daniel entered the company's lobby. The employees, surprised by his presence, greeted him respectfully as he headed to his floor. Emma, who was returning from a short break, didn't expect to meet anyone at that moment. But as she turned the corner, her attention was captured by a figure she instantly recognized. He stood in the lobby impeccably dressed, but with a faint trace of fatigue in his expression. Her heart raced. It was the man she had pulled from the car on the night of the accident. But now he was here, in a place she never imagined he would be. How was this possible? She stood frozen, watching him step into the elevator and disappear behind the doors. For a moment, Emma felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Questions started to arise, but none seemed to have an answer. All she knew was that the man she had saved that night was, somehow, part of the world where she now worked. Emma spent the rest of the day trying to focus on her work, but the image of Daniel lingered in her mind. She could still vividly picture the man she had pulled from the car that rainy night. Now he was here, in the same building, seemingly in charge of everything. The coincidences were hard to ignore, yet she hesitated to jump to conclusions. As she typed data at her desk, a storm of thoughts swirled in her head. Why is he here? Could he really be the man I saved? And more importantly, does he recognize me? Shaking her head, Emma tried to push away the confusion. There was work to do, and she needed to stay focused. In the office upstairs, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Emma. From the moment he saw her in the hallway, a mix of surprise and relief filled him. She was doing well, making progress, just as he had hoped. Yet, Daniel knew he couldn't rush things. There was a delicate balance between his gratitude and the potential impact of revealing the truth to her. "Ethan," he called, flipping through a report. "Make sure she doesn't find out." "Not yet." Ethan hesitated before replying. "Of course, sir. But if I may ask, how long do you plan to keep this a secret?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting out a sigh. "Not much longer. but she deserves to hear it at the right time in a way that makes sense. Until then, I just want to watch, make sure she has everything she needs. Ethan nodded, though his doubt was clear. He knew Daniel was walking a fine line, and one misstep could complicate everything. The next day, Emma arrived at work determined to find answers. During lunch, she pulled Maria aside, feigning nonchalance. "Hey, do you know who the boss here is?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Maria's eyes widened in surprise. "You don't know. It's Daniel Carter. He owns the company and several others. They say he almost died in a car accident a few weeks ago. I think he returned to the office yesterday." "Why?" Emma felt a chill run down her spine. The confirmation brought back all the questions she had been trying to ignore. It was him, but why hadn't she known this before? And even more puzzling, how had she ended up at this company without realizing who was behind it? "Oh, just curious," she replied quickly, masking her nervousness. "He seems important." Maria laughed. "Important is an understatement. They say he's one of the wealthiest men in the country. And super private, too. Almost no one gets to speak with him directly." Emma smiled politely, but her thoughts were in turmoil. Back at her desk, she decided to dig deeper. In the archives, she found documents outlining the company's structure and recent projects. Carefully flipping through the pages, something caught her eye, an internal memo mentioning her hiring. The note was clear. Her recruitment had been approved directly by the president. Emma froze. Why would the company's owner get involved in hiring someone like her, with no qualifications or experience? Later that day, Emma crossed paths with Daniel again. He was leaving a meeting with other executives. When their eyes met, he paused for a moment, as if considering whether to, but instead, Daniel simply nodded politely before continuing down the hall. Emma felt a surge of determination. She needed answers, and she needed them now. At the end of the day, she decided to confront Ethan, who always seemed to be nearby. Finding him in the hallway, Emma approached him directly. "Ethan, I need to talk to you." He looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, Emma. What's on your mind?" She took a deep breath before continuing. "Why was I hired at this company? Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't make sense. I had no experience, and this opportunity came out of nowhere." Ethan hesitated, confirming Emma's suspicions. He knew something. "Emma, he began, then stopped, choosing his words carefully. "You were hired because your potential stood out." "My potential?" Emma raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "That's not an answer, Ethan. Was it Daniel who approved my hiring?" "Why?" Ethan glanced around, ensuring they were alone. He knew he was going against Daniel's orders, but he couldn't avoid the truth any longer. "Yes, it was him, but not for the reason you're thinking. Daniel learned about your story after the accident." Emma took a step back, as if she'd been struck. "So he knew who I was all along? He knew I saved him?" Ethan nodded slowly. "He didn't want you to know. His intention was never to make you feel indebted. He just wanted to give back somehow." Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she held them back firmly. The mix of emotions was overwhelming: surprise, anger, gratitude, and above all, confusion. She didn't know whether to feel betrayed or touched by the gesture. "I need to talk to him," she declared, her voice steady. "Now." Ethan hesitated again. "I'm not sure if that's a good idea." "Ethan, please, I deserve an explanation." Reluctantly, he agreed. "All right, I'll let him know you want to talk, but please, take it easy. He never meant any harm." Emma nodded, but the turmoil in her mind wouldn't let her calm down. The only thing she knew was that she needed to confront Daniel and understand what all of this meant. Emma walked down the corridor toward Daniel's office, her heart racing and her mind full of questions. Each step seemed to echo in the silence of the floor, and doubt gnawed at her. Did he really have good intentions? Or was this just another way for a wealthy person to feel superior by helping someone less fortunate? Before knocking on the door, she paused, took a deep breath, and tried to organize her thoughts. Ethan, who was accompanying her, gave one last warning. "Remember, Emma, he didn't want to expose you to this. Be fair." Emma just nodded before knocking twice on the door. Daniel's deep voice sounded from the other side. "Come in." She pushed the door open slowly, and there he was, sitting behind an impeccably organized desk with an expression that mixed surprise and caution. His eyes fixed on her, immediately recognizing that something important was about to happen. "Emma," he said, standing up, "to what do I owe this visit?" She closed the door behind her, crossed her arms, and looked directly at him. She decided not to waste time with small talk. "Why am I here, Daniel?" she asked, her voice firm. He tilted his head, intrigued. "What do you mean? You work here, don't you?" "You know what I'm talking about," she replied, stepping forward. "I know you approved my hiring. I know you knew who I was from the start. I want to know why." Daniel sighed and leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. For a moment, he seemed to ponder how to explain everything. Finally, he began to speak. "You're right, Emma. I knew who you were. After the accident, I asked Ethan to find out who had saved me. When I learned it was you, a hard-working woman, a single mother supporting a son while working as a collector, I felt indebted. You saved my life, and that's not something I could just ignore. So, your solution was to hire me? Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning?" she asked, feeling a mix of frustration and curiosity. "Because I didn't want you to think it was charity," he replied sincerely. "I didn't want you to feel embarrassed or inferior. I wanted you to have a real chance to change your life, but on your own merits." Emma was silent for a few seconds, processing those words. Part of her wanted to believe him, but another part still felt uncomfortable with the fact that everything had been planned without her knowledge. "I'm not a charity case, Daniel. I've fought my whole life to get everything I have. I didn't need someone wealthy deciding to save me." Daniel stepped forward, his gaze more intense. "I never wanted to treat you that way, Emma. That's not what I saw in you that night. I saw someone strong, someone who risked their own life to save a stranger. That's not something common, and to be honest, I think I'm the one who should be thankful." His words caught her by surprise. The sincerity in his voice was almost palpable, and it disarmed her. She looked away for a moment, trying to control the emotions that were starting to overflow. "I just don't know what to think about all this," she finally admitted. Daniel approached, now just a few steps away. "Then give me a chance to prove my intentions are good. I'm not trying to change who you are, Emma. I just want you to see that you deserve all the good that's happening." Emma took a deep breath, still confused, but something inside her made her relax. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe his intentions were genuinely good. "I need time to process all this," she said finally. Daniel nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need, but please know that I never meant to hurt you." She left the room without saying another word, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts. He knew he had taken a big risk by revealing the truth, but he also believed it was a necessary one. There was something about Emma that made him want to be a better person, and he didn't want to lose the chance to prove it. In the days that followed, Emma started to see Daniel differently. He wasn't the cold, distant boss she had initially imagined. During meetings and interactions in the office, she noticed how he treated everyone with respect, without a hint of arrogance. This realization made her begin to reconsider her first impressions. One day, as she typed up documents at her desk, Daniel passed by and paused for a moment. "Emma, could I speak with you for a moment?" he asked, his tone more casual than usual. She hesitated but nodded. "Of course." They walked to an empty conference room, where he closed the door before speaking. "I know I ask you for time, but there's something I want to show you. Something that might help you understand why I feel this way." Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, handing it to Emma. Confused, she opened it and found a simple yet worn medal with the words "Courage" and "Sacrifice" engraved on it. "What is this?" she asked, looking up at him. "It belonged to my father," Daniel explained, his voice heavy with emotion. "He was a firefighter. He spent his life saving others, but died during a rescue when I was a kid. In some ways, I think I've always looked for that kind of courage in the people around me. When you showed up that night and risked your life for me, it reminded me of him. That's why I feel so connected to you." Emma was silent, a wave of empathy washing over her. For the first time, she saw Daniel as a human being carrying his own emotional burdens and scars. The medal in her hand felt heavier than its actual weight. "I didn't know," she finally said, "because I've never told anyone, he replied with a sad smile. But I thought you deserved to know. The moment was interrupted by a call on Daniel's phone. He apologized and stepped out to answer it, leaving Emma alone in the room. She looked again at the medal, feeling an unexpected connection to his story. Maybe, she thought, Daniel wasn't just a wealthy man trying to make amends, but someone who truly understood what it meant to sacrifice for others. Emma returned to her desk with the medal still in her hand. Daniel's gesture lingered in her mind, vivid and unexpected. In her entire life, no one had ever truly recognized her efforts beyond Max. And now, here was a man like Daniel, not only acknowledging what she had done, but revealing a vulnerable side that deeply moved her. As she organized some documents, thoughts of Max filled her mind. Her little boy, smiling, playing, blissfully unaware of the complexities surrounding his mother's life. And that was a good thing. It was for Max that Emma woke up every day, faced the unknown, and kept pushing forward. Perhaps this new chapter at the company was a chance to give Max a future Emma herself never had. Days passed, and Emma began to feel more at ease with the idea of working there, especially after her conversation with Daniel. He seemed genuine, and although there was still a fine line between gratitude and discomfort, something else was starting to emerge: curiosity. Who was Daniel beyond his wealth and power? Why did he seem to care so much about her and Max? That curiosity grew as Daniel started appearing more often on the floor where Emma worked. Although he maintained a professional demeanor, their exchanged glances and brief encounters felt laden with meaning. One particularly busy afternoon, he surprised her by stopping at her desk with a warm smile. "Emma, how are you settling in?" he asked, leaning slightly to keep their conversation discreet. She looked up, caught off guard, but answered honestly, "I think I'm doing well. I still feel a little out of place, but I'm learning." Daniel nodded, pleased. "You're doing an excellent job, and if you need anything at all, my door is always open." Emma thanked him with a shy smile. As he walked away, she realized that his presence had a way of making the office feel lighter, less intimidating. Over the weekend, Emma took Max to the park. It was one of those rare moments when she could relax and simply enjoy her son's company. Max, full of energy, ran from one end of the park to the other, climbing slides and picking flowers from the grass. While watching Max, Emma was surprised by Daniel, who was walking through the park with a coffee in hand. He looked more relaxed, without his usual suit and tie. When he saw her, he smiled and approached. "Emma, what a coincidence to see you here," he said, pointing to Max, who was running towards them. "And this must be the famous Max." Max stopped beside his mother, curious about the stranger. Emma smiled, a bit embarrassed, but introduced them. "Max, this is Mr. Daniel. He's my boss." Daniel knelt down to be at the boy's level, extending his hand in a friendly manner. "Hello, Max. It's a pleasure to meet you." The little boy shook his hand with a shy smile, but his eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Do you like ice cream?" he asked unexpectedly. Daniel laughed. "I love it. And you?" Max nodded enthusiastically. "My mom promises to buy me some when I behave." Emma gave a nervous laugh, but Daniel seemed genuinely charmed. He stood up and looked at Emma. "Can I join you? I think a walk would do me good," he said. Emma hesitated, but eventually agreed. The three of them spent the next hour walking through the park, chatting about light topics and laughing at Max's antics. For Emma, it was a strange yet comforting moment. For the first time, she saw Daniel outside of work, and he seemed normal, human. The following week, Daniel found an excuse to talk to Emma more often. He invited her to join a small internal project, which meant they would spend more time together. Though Emma was cautious, she accepted, recognizing that the opportunity could be important for her growth at the company. During the meetings, Daniel treated her with respect and valued her opinions. Emma began to realize that he wasn't just interested in helping, he genuinely believed in her. This encouraged her to work even harder, and her confidence began to grow. One day, while they were reviewing a report together, Daniel mentioned something that caught Emma by surprise. "You know, Emma, sometimes I think about what would have happened if you hadn't been at that corner that night. It's strange to think about how one decision of yours completely changed my life." She paused for a moment, looking at him. I guess fate has a funny way of connecting people, doesn't it? She said, somewhat awkwardly. Daniel smiled. Yes, it does, and honestly, I'm grateful for it. Emma looked away, feeling her face flush. There was something in his voice, in the way he looked at her, that made her feel unsettled. She had never experienced this kind of attention before, especially from someone like him. What Emma didn't know was that Daniel was also struggling with his own feelings. Initially, he just wanted to repay what she had done for him. But over time, he began to admire her strength, her determination, and, above all, her dedication as a mother. He knew he was crossing the line between gratitude and something more, but he couldn't help it. One night, while reflecting on the past few months, Daniel confided in Ethan, I can't ignore this. Ethan, Emma is different. She's unlike anyone I've ever met. Ethan, always the cautious advisor, looked at him with a worried expression. Just be careful, sir. Feelings can complicate things. Daniel sighed. I know, but it's too late to turn back. The next morning, Daniel found Max at the daycare where Emma dropped him off daily. He had gone there on purpose, determined to understand Emma's world better. When he saw him, Max greeted him cheerfully. Mr. Daniel, my mom says you're nice. He laughed, kneeling down to talk to him. Your mom is an amazing woman. You're very lucky to have her. Max smiled and hugged his teddy bear. She always tells me I'm the most important thing in her life. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. Suddenly he understood why Emma was so strong. She didn't live just for herself. Everything she did was for Max, and that made him admire her even more. As the days passed, Emma began to notice that Daniel's presence was becoming more constant in her life. Whether at work or outside of it, he seemed to find ways to be around. Gradually, the initial discomfort was replaced by something more complicated. She admired his kindness and how he seemed to understand her struggles, but she feared that this closeness might create expectations she didn't know if she could meet. One morning, while organizing her desk, Maria approached with a curious smile. Emma, you and the boss seem to be getting pretty close lately, she commented casually. Emma paused for a moment, trying not to show the discomfort she felt with the observation. It's not like that. He's just helping me with a project we're working on. That's all, she replied, turning back to organize the papers. Maria stayed quiet, but her expression showed she wasn't fully convinced. If you say so, but honestly, I think he likes you. And if it's true, who could blame him? You're amazing. Emma laughed nervously, but Maria's words lingered in her mind. Did Daniel like her? The possibility made her uneasy, but she brushed the thought aside and focused on her responsibilities. Later that day, Emma was called into Daniel's office to review the project's progress. He was seated at his desk, going through some reports, but when he saw her walk in, he greeted her with a warm smile. Emma, glad you're here. Please have a seat, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. She sat down, her posture straight, her eyes focused on the documents in front of her. During the meeting, Daniel was attentive, complimenting her ideas and offering suggestions. But at one point, he shifted the focus from work. Emma, can I ask you something? He said, his tone becoming more personal. She looked at him, surprised. Sure. How do you do it? He asked, leaning forward slightly. Work so hard, take care of Max, and still find the strength to keep going every day? The question caught Emma off guard. No one had ever shown a real interest in understanding her struggles. I don't have much of a choice, Daniel. When you're a mom, everything you do is for your child. Max is my strength, my reason to keep moving forward, she answered, trying to keep the emotion out of her voice. Daniel nodded, visibly moved by her response. That's something I deeply admire about you, Emma. Your courage and determination are truly inspiring. Emma looked away, feeling exposed. Why was he saying these things? And why did it make her heart race? In the days that followed, Emma tried to put some distance between herself and Daniel, fearing that their growing closeness might cause problems. But avoiding Daniel turned out to be harder than she expected. He always seemed to find a way to start a conversation, whether it was in the hallway during lunch or at the end of the day. Despite this, something inside her felt uneasy. There was a part of her story that Emma had never shared, not even with Daniel. The past with Max's father was a painful chapter she preferred to leave buried. Now, with these confusing emotions surfacing, she worried that this secret could become a barrier between them. As days went by, Emma began to feel the weight of the connection forming between her and Daniel. Let's play a little game with those who only read the comments. Type chocolate in the comments. Only those who've read this far will understand. Now, back to the story. One Friday afternoon, as Emma returned from lunch, Maria appeared again. But this time, her comment carried a sharper tone. You know, Emma, people are starting to talk. This special attention Daniel gives you, it doesn't seem very professional, Maria said, her smile mischievous. Emma stopped, surprised by the remark. People? Who? Oh, rumors spread. You know how it is. Some think you're taking advantage of the situation. After all, he's never shown this much interest in anyone before, Maria added. Emma felt a wave of nerves. She knew Daniel hadn't done anything inappropriate, but Maria's words stirred a fear she'd been trying to ignore. What did others think about her? At the end of the day, Emma decided to avoid Daniel. Instead of taking the elevator as usual, she used the stairs. When she reached the ground floor, she ran into Ethan, who seemed to be waiting for her. Emma? Daniel asked me to call you. He wants to talk about the project. She hesitated, feeling a tension she couldn't explain. Tell him I'll talk to him on Monday. I'm late to pick up Max. Ethan frowned, but didn't push the matter. He could tell something was wrong. That evening, Emma was at home preparing dinner, while Max, full of energy, began drawing at the kitchen table. On the paper, Max scribbled something that caught Emma's attention. A picture of 3 people holding hands. Who's this, Max? Emma asked, pointing to the third figure beside them. Max smiled innocently. It's Mr. Daniel. He always smiles at us, and I think he likes you, Mommy. Emma froze for a moment, staring at the drawing. The simplicity of Max's words made everything seem more complicated. How could she explain to her son that Daniel was just her boss, when even Max seemed to sense something more? The next morning, Emma decided she needed to confront the rumors and her growing connection with Daniel before things got out of hand. She arrived early at the office and headed straight to his door. She knocked, and his short response came from inside. Come in. Daniel seemed surprised to see her there so early, but his expression soon softened. Emma, this is a surprise. How can I help you? Emma sat down in front of him, crossing her arms. I need to talk about something important, something that's starting to bother me. He frowned, looking confused. Of course, go ahead. She took a deep breath before continuing. People are talking about us, about the attention you've been giving me. They're implying that I'm only here because of your protection. Daniel was silent for a moment, clearly processing what he had just heard. Finally, he spoke in a firm tone. Emma, who's saying this? It doesn't matter who. The point is, if these things are being said, it means something is wrong, she replied, trying to control her tone. And, to be honest, I'm starting to think that maybe I let things get out of hand. Daniel shook his head, visibly upset. Emma, that's ridiculous. The fact that I value your work or respect, you shouldn't be a reason for gossip. These people are wrong, and I won't tolerate this kind of behavior in my company. But it is happening, Daniel, she countered more seriously. And I need to think about what's best for me and my son. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. Emma, if you're suggesting you should distance yourself because of what others are saying, I need to ask you to reconsider. You earned your place here. What others say doesn't matter. Emma looked away, fighting the confusion in her mind. There was something in his voice, in the intensity of his gaze, that made her want to believe him. But she knew the world wasn't always fair, and rumors could easily turn into something more destructive. I just don't want my presence here to harm you or affect my life outside of work, she said finally. Daniel leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. I understand. But Emma, I want you to know that you have my support. Always. I'll deal with these rumors and make sure nothing affects your position here. She nodded, but uncertainty still lingered in the air. Over the following days, Daniel took steps to curb the rumors. He called Maria and other employees for a private meeting, making it clear that gossip would not be tolerated in the company. But despite this, Emma still felt the weight of the words she had heard. One night, while putting Max to bed, Emma reflected on everything that had happened. Daniel always seemed to be on her side. But was that really what she wanted? He had become an important figure in her life. But the doubt about the impact of this closeness continued to grow. Daniel, on the other hand, was equally restless. He knew the situation had shaken Emma, and it frustrated him. He couldn't understand how something as genuine as his admiration for her could be turned into something so negative by others. Was he pushing too hard? The days passed slowly for Emma. Although Daniel had tried to contain the rumors, she still felt the looks and whispers in the office. Deep down, she knew the issue wasn't just about the gossip. There was something bigger that bothered her. The invisible barrier her own past had created. The secret she carried. That night, while finishing the dishes, Emma paused to watch Max, who was sleeping soundly on the couch. Her son was everything to her, but he was also the reason for her cautious choices and her resistance to letting others get too close. Emma knew she couldn't ignore the signs that Daniel wanted more than just to help her. But there was something he still didn't know about her. Something that could change everything. The next morning, Emma decided she needed to get away from the tension at the office. She took a day off and took Max to visit a nearby park where she used to go before starting to work at Daniel's company. The place had a special meaning. It was where Emma had made some of the hardest decisions of her life. While Max played on the swings, Emma sat on a bench, lost in thought. Daniel, on the other hand, felt Emma's absence at work. He had gotten used to seeing her every day, to hearing her voice. And now, he felt something was wrong. He tried to focus on his responsibilities, but the restlessness wouldn't leave him. Finally, he decided to call Ethan. "Find out where Emma is," he ordered without preamble. "I want to make sure she's okay." Ethan hesitated for a moment, but followed the order. A few hours later, Daniel had his answer. Emma was at the park with Max. Without thinking twice, he left the office and drove straight there. When he arrived, he parked the car and saw Emma sitting alone on a bench. She seemed distracted, watching Max play. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. Was he invading her space? Finally, he approached carefully, trying not to startle her. Emma noticed his presence before he said anything. When she turned, her face showed surprise but also exhaustion. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" she asked, trying to hide the tension in her voice. "I was worried. You didn't show up at work, and, well, I wanted to make sure you were okay," he answered sincerely. Emma sighed, looking away. "I just needed some time. There's a lot going on, and I wanted to clear my mind." Daniel sat next to her, keeping a respectful distance, but fixing his gaze on her. "Emma, if there's anything I can do to help, you know I'm here." She laughed, but without humor. "That's what scares me, Daniel. You're always there, wanting to help, trying to fix everything. But life isn't always that simple." He frowned, puzzled. "What do you mean by that?" Emma stayed silent for a few moments before finally deciding to speak. "There are things about me you don't know, things I've kept in the past because it's just easier that way." Daniel leaned in slightly, intrigued. "Emma, whatever it is, you don't have to carry it alone. I want to understand." She looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Finally, she took a deep breath and began to share. "Max's father, he wasn't the man I thought he'd be. When I found out I was pregnant, he disappeared, said he didn't want a family, that it would ruin his life. So I had to move forward alone. Pregnant, I couldn't find a job, so I had no choice. I collected recyclables to sell, just to afford a place to live and put food on the table for Max. It wasn't easy, Daniel, but I built a life for him and me." Daniel's chest tightened as he absorbed her words. He could see the pain in Emma's eyes, the strength she had to summon to get through it all. Now, he understood why she was so protective and cautious. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you. But if I can say one thing, I think you did the right thing. You gave Max a home, love, and that's worth more than anything." Emma felt tears well up in her eyes, but she held them back. She didn't want to appear vulnerable, even though part of her longed to let go. "That's why I can't afford to make mistakes, Daniel. Everything I do is for him. I can't risk something or someone disrupting our lives." Daniel nodded, understanding. "I get it, but Emma, I want you to know I'm not here to disrupt anything. I'm here because I admire you, because I believe in you, and because, Well, I think you and Max are much more special than you realize. Emma looked away, feeling her heart race. It was hard to hear those words, but something in his voice made them seem true. Max ran over to them, holding a flower he had picked. "Look, Mommy, this is for you." Emma smiled, taking the flower. "Thank you, my love." Max then looked at Daniel. "You like my mommy, don't you?" Emma's eyes widened at her son's direct question. Daniel laughed and knelt to talk to Max. "I like your mom a lot, Max. She's an amazing person." Emma blushed, unsure of what to say. But before she could respond, Max grabbed her hand and pulled her to join the play. Daniel watched them, feeling a strange sense of peace. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to fight for the space he was beginning to occupy in their lives. The days following the park conversation brought a subtle change for Emma. While she was still hesitant to let Daniel in, she felt something different about him. He didn't make empty promises or try to push her into anything. Instead, his actions spoke for themselves. He was present, but always respected the boundaries she set. At work, Daniel seemed more distant in public, maintaining professionalism to avoid further gossip. Yet Emma noticed the small gestures. He always found a discreet way to ask about Max or offer help with challenging projects. These short but meaningful moments planted a seed of doubt in Emma. Could he really be different from the other men who had let her down? One weekend, Daniel decided to do something special for Max. He called Emma, something he rarely did outside of work, and asked if he could take Max out for a little outing. Emma's hesitation was clear in her voice. "Daniel, you know I don't usually let Max go out with anyone but me." "I understand, Emma. I don't want you to feel pressured. Think of it as a way of thanking you for welcoming me into your life, even just a little. You can come with us if you prefer." Emma was silent for a few seconds, considering the offer. Finally, she agreed, but with one condition. "If Max wants to go, I'll come along. I don't want him to feel like I'm forcing anything." Daniel accepted gladly, and the next day, the three of them met at a city-themed park. Max was thrilled to see the attractions, and his excitement was contagious to Emma. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to relax and enjoy the moment. During the outing, Daniel showed a side of himself that Emma had not yet seen. He laughed openly, helped Max choose rides, and even tried to convince him to go on a roller coaster. When Max got tired, the three of them sat under a tree sharing an ice cream. "He has your strength," Daniel remarked, looking at Max. "You can see it in his eyes. You've done an incredible job, Emma." Emma blushed at the compliment. "I do what I can. Sometimes I feel it's not enough, but Max doesn't seem to mind. He just wants me around, and that's what matters. He knows you love him." More than anything, Daniel said, his tone full of admiration. For a moment, Emma's eyes met his, and she felt a warmth in her chest. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it. He seemed to really understand what it meant to fight for someone, to put someone else above yourself. The next day, back at work, Emma found a small surprise on her desk, a plant in a decorated pot with a simple card that read, "To remind you that the strongest things grow in the most unlikely places. Daniel." She held the pot in her hands, an involuntary smile spreading across her face. The gesture was small, but full of meaning. Maria, passing by the corridor, noticed the smile and couldn't resist commenting. "Looks like someone has an admirer," she said, teasing. Emma just laughed, but something inside her began to change. Maybe Daniel really was different. Maybe he deserved a chance. Later that week, Emma decided to return the gesture somehow. She spent the night making homemade cookies with Max, and the next day brought a small box to Daniel's office. When she walked in, he looked up, surprised. "This is for you," she said, placing the box on his desk. "Max and I made them. He insisted you'd like them." Daniel opened the box and smiled at the carefully decorated cookies. He picked one up and took a bite, his expression showing clear satisfaction. "Perfect. Thank you, Emma. And tell Max he has talent." Emma laughed, feeling strangely at ease. For the first time, there was no tension or discomfort between them. Just a simple, sincere moment. The closeness continued over the weeks. Daniel started inviting Emma and Max to small activities like family lunches or visits to the zoo. Max, with his infectious energy, seemed to love Daniel's presence, and Emma couldn't deny he was starting to occupy an important space in their lives. But despite this, Emma was still afraid. Afraid to open her heart and be disappointed again. Afraid that Daniel didn't fully understand what it meant to be with her and Max. One night, while putting her son to bed, Emma reflected on how much her life had changed in the past few months. She wanted to believe that Daniel was different. But what if he wasn't? The following weekend, Daniel organized an event at the company to celebrate the success of a recent project. He made sure to invite Emma and Max, insisting it would be an opportunity to celebrate together. At the event, Emma was impressed with the organization and the way Daniel seemed to command everything with ease. He approached her during the evening, offering a glass of juice. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked, smiling. "Everything is amazing. You really know how to impress people," Emma replied, half joking. "The only person I want to impress is right here," he said, looking directly at her. Emma felt her face warm, but before she could respond, Max appeared, holding Daniel's hand and pulling him to dance. Daniel, laughing, followed Max to the dance floor, where he began to dance exaggeratedly to make him laugh. Emma watched from a distance, feeling a mix of joy and fear. He seemed so genuine, but there was still something inside her that resisted. That night after the event, Daniel walked Emma and Max to their car. Before saying goodbye, he turned to Emma and with a more serious voice said, "Emma, I know you have doubts about us, but I want you to know that I'm willing to wait. I won't push anything, but I'll stay by your side for as long as you need." Emma remained silent, moved by the sincerity in his words. Finally, she replied, "Thank you, Daniel. I really appreciate that." As he walked away, Emma realized she might be starting to trust him. But would trust be enough to open her heart again? The bond between Emma, Max, and Daniel continued to grow stronger. Despite her reservations, Emma began to see something in Daniel she hadn't seen in a long time. Stability. He was there, present, not just to help her, but to build something genuine with her and Max. Yet a shadow from her past lingered, and she knew she'd need to confront it before moving forward. One quiet morning at the office, while Emma was reviewing reports, Ethan walked into Daniel's office with a concerned expression. He carried an envelope in his hand and placed it on the desk. "Sir, this just arrived. It's about Emma." Daniel carefully picked up the envelope and began reading. His face shifted from surprise to worry. The document was from a lawyer representing Max's biological father. He had resurfaced, demanding visitation rights. "Is this serious?" Daniel asked, looking at Ethan. "Very. It seems he's ready to take the case to court if necessary," Ethan replied. Daniel knew this could destroy the progress Emma had made. More than that, he feared the impact it would have on Max. By the end of the day, Daniel decided to talk to Emma. He waited until everyone had left the office and went to her desk. "Emma, can we talk?" he asked, his tone more serious than usual. She nodded, curious about his expression. When they reached his office, Daniel closed the door and handed her the envelope. Emma read the document, her face turning pale. "He can't do this," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Emma, I don't know all the details, but I want to help. If you need a lawyer, someone to fight alongside you, I'm here," Daniel said, trying to comfort her. Emma placed the paper on the desk, taking a deep breath. "He left when he found out I was pregnant. He said he didn't want anything to do with us. And now, years later, he thinks he can just show up and claim something. It's unfair, Daniel. And you're not alone in this. We'll fight this together," he assured her. Emma looked at him, touched by the determination in his voice. But a part of her still hesitated. "Daniel, I appreciate it, but this is something I need to handle on my own. I don't want Max to think I rely on others to protect him." He nodded, respecting her decision. "I understand, but know that if you change your mind, I'm here." In the days that followed, Emma threw herself into the legal battle. Between meetings with lawyers and searching for old documents, she barely had time to focus on work. Daniel noticed the toll it was taking on her, but refrained from interfering, hoping she'd come to him if she needed help. At home, Max also sensed that something was different. One night, as Emma was organizing papers at the kitchen table, Max approached her with his teddy bear. "Mommy, are you sad?" he asked with the innocence of someone who just wanted to help. Emma stopped and hugged her son, holding back tears. "No, sweetheart, I'm just tired. But everything will be okay, I promise." Max hugged his teddy bear tightly and said, "Mr. Daniel can help. He's really strong." Emma smiled but didn't respond. Could Daniel really help? And more importantly, would she let him? The following week, the situation escalated. Max's father sent a formal notice to begin the process for shared custody. Emma felt the ground fall out from under her. Her biggest concern was Max's well-being. She knew her son's biological father didn't have a trustworthy record, but she feared he'd use her financial struggles against her. When Daniel heard the news, he couldn't stay on the sidelines any longer. That evening, he went to Emma's apartment, determined to convince her to accept his help. "Emma, I understand you want to handle this on your own, but this isn't just about you. It's about Max. And I know you'd do anything for him, even accept help from someone like me," he said with a soft smile. Emma sighed, battling her pride. She knew he was right. "Daniel, I'm so afraid this will end up hurting Max. I don't want him to feel like his life can be divided like an object," she confessed. "And that's why you won't face this alone. I'm here, Emma, and I'm not going anywhere," he assured her. Finally, Emma agreed to let Daniel help her. Together, they hired a renowned lawyer and began gathering evidence against the biological father's claim. Daniel also used his resources to investigate the man, uncovering information that could be used in court. On the day of the hearing, Emma was nervous, but Daniel was by her side, holding her hand as they waited outside the courtroom. When the case was called, Emma walked in with her head held high, determined to protect her son. During the hearing, Daniel's lawyer presented compelling evidence that Max's biological father had never shown interest in caring for him before, and that his current intentions seemed more financially motivated than focused on his well-being. Emma also gave an emotional testimony, explaining how she had fought to raise Max on her own and never let him lack love or care. In the end, the judge ruled in Emma's favor, denying visitation rights to the biological father. When the verdict was announced, Emma felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She looked at Daniel, who smiled back proudly. That night, back at the apartment, Emma finally allowed herself to relax. She watched Daniel playing with Max in the living room and felt something different. For the first time, there was no fear or distrust, only gratitude and a growing feeling that he was becoming part of the family. After Max went to bed, Emma called Daniel out to the balcony. The night was cool, and the stars shone brightly in the sky. "Daniel, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for us," she said, her voice breaking. He took her hands, looking directly into her eyes. "You don't need to thank me, Emma. Everything I did was because I care about you and Max. You both mean more to me than I can express." Emma felt tears roll down her cheeks. Without saying a word, she stepped forward and hugged him, finally allowing herself to fully trust him. The days following the court victory brought a calm Emma hadn't felt in a long time. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, she felt she wasn't facing everything alone. Max was safe, and Daniel had become a constant presence, not just in her life, but in her son's heart as well. Despite this, Emma wasn't ready to take everything for granted. She knew opening her heart was a slow process, and even with Daniel by her side, there was a lingering fear she needed to overcome. One Saturday morning, Daniel showed up at her apartment with an unexpected proposal. "Emma, how about we spend the day out? Just the three of us. Somewhere peaceful, no work, no worries," he suggested. Emma hesitated for a moment. Despite trusting him more, she was still adjusting to the idea of including him in her family routine. But before she could respond, Max ran to the door, holding his teddy bear. "Let's go, Mom, please," the little boy said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Emma laughed and agreed. "All right, but nothing too extravagant, okay?" Daniel smiled, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I promise." The outing took them to a small farm on the outskirts of the city, with open fields, fruit trees, and animals that immediately charmed Max. Daniel seemed to have thought of everything, bringing snacks and even a small picnic basket. To Emma, it was a gesture more meaningful than any expensive gift. While Max chased chickens, Daniel and Emma sat under a tree, watching him play. The moment seemed almost surreal to Emma, who had believed for so long that there was no room for simplicity or joy in her life. "It's nice to see you relax a bit," Daniel commented, breaking the silence. Emma looked at him with a shy smile. "I haven't done this in years. It was always just Max and me trying to get by." Daniel leaned in slightly, his expression serious. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore, Emma. I want to be here for you, for both of you, and I want you to know that won't change." His words touched her deeply, but she was still afraid to fully let go. "I believe you, Daniel, but I need you to understand that this is new for me. It's not easy to trust that someone won't just disappear," she replied sincerely. Daniel nodded. "I know, and I don't expect you to change that overnight. I just want you to know that I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." As the sun began to set, they gathered up the picnic things and headed back to the car. Max, exhausted from playing all day, fell asleep in the back seat, clutching his teddy bear. On the drive home, Emma sat in silence, gazing out the window. Try as she might, Daniel's gestures were wholly breaking down the walls she had built over the years. When they arrived at the apartment, Daniel helped carry Max to his room. He carefully laid him in bed and tucked him in with a blanket. As he left the room, he found Emma waiting for him in the living room. "Thank you for today." "Really," she said softly. "There's no need to thank me, Emma. I'd do it every day if I could," he replied. Emma felt a wave of emotion, but before she could say anything, Daniel stepped closer. For a moment, they stood in silence, their eyes speaking more than words ever could. Finally, Emma broke the stillness. "I want to try, Daniel. I want to try to trust, but I need you to be patient with me." Daniel smiled, taking her hands in his. "Always." Before Emma could respond, he leaned in slowly, making it clear he would give her the chance to pull away. But she didn't. Instead, she closed her eyes and let him kiss her. It was a gentle kiss, filled with meaning that no words could convey. Emma felt her heart race, but at the same time, a calmness washed over her. When they pulled apart, Daniel's eyes remained fixed on hers. "I've been waiting for this," he murmured, still holding her hands. Emma smiled shyly, warmth spreading through her that she hadn't felt in years. "I think I was waiting too. I just didn't realize it." Daniel chuckled softly, bringing a hand to her face and gently brushing her cheek. "Emma, you and Max are everything I want. I'll never let you down." She nodded, feeling for the first time that her walls were truly beginning to crumble. In the days that followed, the relationship between Emma and Daniel began to shift. It wasn't just about help or friendship anymore. It was something deeper, more meaningful. He started spending more time with them, creating moments Max cherished. Slowly, Emma realized she didn't have to carry all the weight alone. One evening, as they were having dinner together, Max looked at Daniel with a mischievous smile. "Are you going to be my daddy?" Emma choked on her water, startled by the sudden question. Daniel laughed, his gaze filled with affection. "Well, that depends on your mom," he said, playfully. Max turned to Emma, eagerly waiting for an answer. Emma blushed, but managed to laugh at the situation. "Let's take it slow, sweetie," she said, trying to hide her emotions. The following week, Daniel planned a special dinner. He invited Emma and Max to his home, something Emma hesitated to accept at first. She had never seen where he lived and feared the contrast between their lives might become too stark. But eventually, she agreed, realizing it was time to let go of that fear. When they arrived at Daniel's house, Emma was surprised. Though spacious and elegant, the space felt warm and personal. There were photos from his travels, books scattered around, and even a cozy kitchen area, which Daniel used to impress Max by flipping pancakes. "It's not what people expect from a CEO, but I enjoy cooking," he said, flipping a pancake in the air. Max clapped excitedly, and Emma couldn't help but smile. The simple gesture made her realize that despite his wealth and status, Daniel was genuine. He wasn't trying to be someone else. After dinner, while Max played in the living room, Daniel asked Emma to join him on the balcony. The cool night air brought a sense of calm as they looked out over the city lights. "Emma, there's something I want to ask you," he began, turning to face her. She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" Daniel took a deep breath and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Emma's eyes widened, her heart pounding. I know this might seem fast, but everything I've experienced with you and Max over these past months has shown me what truly matters. I want to be by your side, Emma, always. I want to build a life with you and Max. He opened the box, revealing a simple yet elegant ring. Emma Johnson, will you marry me? For a few seconds, Emma was speechless, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she smiled and nodded. Yes, Daniel, yes, I will. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced as emotions overflowed. Hearing the celebration, Max ran over to them. Are you getting married? He asked excitedly. Emma laughed, lifting her son into her arms. Yes, my love, we're going to be a family. Daniel wrapped his arms around both of them, feeling more complete than he ever thought possible. Emma's life changed completely in the weeks following the engagement. Though the routine with Max and the work at Daniel's company remained intense, something had shifted inside her. A sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. Daniel, for his part, was more present than ever, helping her plan details of the future they were building together. On a sunny weekend, Daniel organized a lunch at his home to celebrate the engagement with close friends and some company employees. Emma was nervous. She didn't like being the center of attention and feared people might judge her for her humble background. However, Daniel made sure the event was relaxed and welcoming. Max was the star of the lunch, running around and charming the guests with his energy. Emma watched her son play, the smile on her face reflecting this new chapter in her life. Are you okay? Daniel asked, approaching with 2 glasses of juice. He handed one to her, looking concerned. Emma nodded but sighed. I just keep thinking if I really deserve all this. It feels like a dream. And well, dreams don't always last. Daniel set his glass on the table and took her hands. Emma, you deserve more than this. You deserve to be happy without reservations, without fears. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that to you. Emma smiled, touched by his words. Before she could respond, Max ran over, holding an improvised bouquet of flowers he'd picked from the garden. Mommy, look what I made, Max said, extending the bouquet to Emma. Emma took the flowers and kissed her son's forehead. They're beautiful, my love. Thank you. Daniel crouched down to Max's level. Those flowers are for Mommy, but I think I need to steal her for a few minutes. Can I? Max giggled and nodded. Only if you take me to get ice cream afterward. Deal, Daniel replied, laughing. Daniel led Emma to a quieter corner of the garden. Under a leafy tree, they could talk away from curious eyes. I know this is new for you, Emma, and I know it won't be easy to get used to. But I want you to know I'm here, always, he said, looking directly into her eyes. Emma took a deep breath, allowing herself to relax for the first time that day. Thank you, Daniel, for everything, for believing in me, even when I didn't. Daniel smiled and kissed her again, a gesture that seemed to seal everything they had promised each other. As the weeks passed, the wedding preparations began to take shape. Emma wanted something simple, while Daniel insisted she deserved something special. In the end, they reached a compromise, an intimate ceremony in an open field with flowers and soft lights, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. However, the journey to the wedding was not without challenges. Emma still had to deal with insecurities that arose from time to time. One day, while organizing documents at work, she found an old photo of Max's father hidden in a drawer. The man's gaze in the photo brought back memories she preferred to forget. When Daniel arrived that night, he found Emma quiet, looking out the window with the photo in her hands. He approached slowly, concerned. What happened? He asked, sitting next to her. Emma showed him the photo, her eyes teary. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm building something Max will remember as good, and if somehow all of this goes wrong. Daniel took the photo and looked at it for a moment before setting it aside. Emma, everything you've done so far has been for Max, and everything we're building is for him too. Don't let the past hold you back. It doesn't define who you are or what you can achieve. Emma looked at him, feeling a new wave of gratitude. Thank you, Daniel. I don't know how I managed to live so long without someone like you. Daniel laughed softly and held her face in his hands. Maybe you were just waiting for the right person. Finally, the big day arrived. The field was decorated with wildflowers, and a light breeze swayed the white curtains surrounding the altar. Emma wore a simple yet elegant dress that seemed made for her. Max, dressed as a little groomsman, was radiant. Daniel waited at the altar, nervous, but with an uncontrollable smile. When Emma began to walk toward him, all the sounds around seemed to fade away. For him, only that moment existed, that love they had built together. When they reached the altar, the officiant began the ceremony, but instead of rehearsed words, Daniel decided to speak from the heart. Emma, you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've taught me what it means to fight, what it means to love unconditionally. Today, I promise to stand by your side every day, building a life full of love and joy for you and Max. Emma couldn't hold back her tears. When it was her turn to speak, her voice trembled, but it was steady. Daniel, you came into my life when I least expected it, but exactly when I needed it the most. You didn't just show me that I could trust again. You gave me hope. Today, I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your family. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Max ran toward them, interrupting their kiss with a big hug. Now we're a real family, he exclaimed, making everyone laugh. Daniel and Emma embraced Max, feeling that they had finally found what they had always been searching for: love, security, and a promising future. What do you think about Daniel's actions? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What's your score? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to keep up with all our stories. And take a moment to check out more heartwarming stories by clicking here on the end screen.